Hello all, this is Barbara Mann from Your Empowered You, and welcome to our video on should leaders be consistent, flexible, or both? And the shorter answer is that leaders should actually be both depending on what the situation is. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about is when should leaders be consistent and why? And when should leaders be flexible and why? So let's talk about when leaders should be consistent. So definitely all leaders should be consistent on egregious acts, poor behavior, poor results, adhering to whatever your company handbook looks like. And leaders should also be consistent on their mannerisms and style, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But again, certain things like certain types of behaviors, there should be zero tolerance for certain types of behaviors. Poor performance, whatever your standards look like, obviously that needs to be addressed if it continues over time. So there needs to be some sort of consistent way of handling these types of issues. And the reason that it is important is because it establishes boundaries, right? It establishes boundaries with every level of the staff, whether it is your C-execs, whether it's middle management, whether it's individual contributors. It establishes the boundaries for your entire organization. It also instills fairness to every employee. So if we are consistent on this is how we're going to handle this type of behavior, it doesn't matter who it is, and it could be your CEO all the way down to, again, an individual contributor. It creates a sense of fairness if it's applied consistently. It establishes what's acceptable, what is unacceptable behavior and or actions. And every employee needs to know what that looks like. It might actually be different depending on the organization, but people need to understand what's the acceptable and unacceptable behaviors in an organization. One of the key things, though, about consistency amongst management is that managers need to be calibrated. The managers need to be aligned. I can't tell you how many times we did deal with situations and have dealt with situations where one manager applied one standard, another manager applied another standard. Completely inconsistent. It leads to massive confusion for the staff, especially when they transfer from one manager to another. And you create that perception of unfairness and inequity. So it's very important that all the management staff is very calibrated and very aligned on, what's an egregious act, what is an acceptable and unacceptable behavior look like, what is allowed in one department. An example might be how does one department or one team handle when someone's rude to another? Do they do anything about it? Hopefully they do, but do they do that? And is it the same type of follow-up in every single department? And that's important because people talk. They'll say, well, I did that in my group and nothing happened. Creates a massive confusion. So the more that managers are very aligned and very calibrated with those sorts of levels of behavior, acceptable levels of behavior, the easier it is for the organization to run. Maybe people don't like what the rule is, but if you apply it fairly, they'll understand it. So let's talk a little bit about consistency with the leader's mannerism and style. And that's important because people want to know what they're getting when a manager is, when things are going well and when things aren't going well. And really the mannerism and style should be the same. Now, how they may try to rectify something that isn't going their way, that might look different, obviously, than something that's going well. But being kind of control of your emotions and your style should remain consistent. People want to know, am I seeing the same person when something isn't going well than when something is going well? And this really allows for a lot of trust amongst the staff. So if someone stays in control and they stay consistent with that style and that mannerism, it really starts instilling trust with the staff and, again, predictability. People look to management to try to help and use teamwork to get people through the adverse times. It's easy to lead a team through great times. It's a little more difficult to lead them through adverse times, and that mannerism style should be consistent. You don't want to be popping off and throwing papers obviously all over the place if something isn't going your way. You just want to handle it calmly, coolly, or however your normal mannerism and style is. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean you have to be calm and all that. That's not exactly what I mean. If that's your style, that's great. If that's not your style, that's okay. I'm a little more animated, and even if things weren't going well, I was still more animated. I just wasn't like throwing papers and all that. I was just more like, well, get through this kind of thing. That was my style. Okay? So when should we be flexible? Let's talk about when we should be flexible. Flexibility is important. Most of the time, managers will be flexible. There's certain things that you can't be flexible on. Egregious acts, you can't be flexible on it. Most of the things you can be flexible. Really what the guideline that I would use is if there's no kind of negative impact on your results, on your staff, then it's something that we should probably reconsider. So it could be something that, oh, that's how we've always done it. You know, it's something that was done 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Hey, if it doesn't have any negative impact on anything and it makes sense, then reconsider it and potentially make that change. This really allows for the staff to be part of reviewing old policies, maybe old procedures, and gets that open discussion going so that it unleashes their creativity to solve potential issues. It's fabulous when the staff can come up with a solution. Another time when we should be flexible as leaders is if it creates any kind of hardship for a particular employee. It's good for us to consider alternative solutions, and really exploring alternative solutions is where the creativity can also be instilled. You can do this and still stay within the boundaries. So a good example might be is that an employee has a hard time getting to work at, say, 8 o'clock. Okay, that's a common one. Well, if you obviously allow for some flexibility, if you can, maybe their start date can be at 8:30. Maybe they have some childcare issues or a longer commute, things of that nature, and they need to adjust it to 8:30, then by all means do so if you can do that. That is an easy solution. It's an alternative solution. It's still staying within the boundaries. It's not saying you can be late. It's just saying you're adjusting something. It's showing flexibility, that you're willing to work with people because it helps them and it helps the organization, right? Another time we talked about this, to be flexible. If it doesn't make any sense, if something doesn't make sense anymore, make the change. Be flexible about it. Someone might point out something like something that's small, like I don't know, some ridiculous policy about a particular dress code. Now that might be an HR handbook thing, but maybe it's something where an interpretation could be reviewed, could be looked on differently. That's just a small example, but it's something that might be really darn important to the staff. Okay? Maybe that's something that should be looked at. Maybe it just doesn't make sense anymore, right? Now, when we are flexible, very important, when we are flexible, it really shows that everybody's voice is heard. So not just individual contributors, but also management, that they can be part of the creative process to fuel that curiosity, and that people are open to alternatives and open to other ways of doing things, coming up with better solutions. It really empowers the staff. The whole thing about empowerment is being able to problem solve and be part of that. So when we can be flexible on certain policies, again, that don't affect results, they don't affect staff, things of that nature, it really creates that sense of empowerment. It instills the trust, and which is obviously one of the most important things that you can have with your staff is trust. Now, when you have this, when you show that you can be flexible, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to change everything. But what it does mean is that people will understand if you can't make that change, because they're going to trust you. They see that you have made other types of changes, that you're flexible in certain things. And I've done this many times where it's like, here's why, we really can't adjust that. And if you have a good reason, maybe it's something that adjusted, maybe it's something that impacted part of the staff adversely, but it was positive. It was a positive impact for some. Well, that's going to create an inequity. It can't happen. So that is a situation where maybe somebody wasn't looking at the whole entire picture. But when you start explaining things to people, they understand. Again, if you have something that's some small change and you're just being like, no, we can't do that, we've always done it, with no reason, people are going to get upset. That shows inflexibility. So if you can make the change, do it. Let's do it. The staff has a lot of great solutions out there. So unleash that creativity and be open to alternatives. So let's wrap this up in a bow. Consistency is a must for certain types of acts and behaviors. Sets the boundaries. It creates a sense of fairness for all and predictability. And managers must be aligned on what that unacceptable type of behaviors and poor performance looks like, so everybody can adhere to the same sort of boundaries. Flexibility, that's important too. They're both important. So I don't want to say one's more important than the other, but flexibility is going to happen more often than probably the consistency. So flexibility for certain items, it creates a sense of empowerment for your staff, the creativity, the risk-taking. It allows for better solutions and taking a look at maybe some outdated policies and procedures and gets us to a better tomorrow. So flexibility is very important. Doesn't mean that you're going to be able to make all the changes and be flexible on every situation. No, you probably won't, and that's fine. But if you can do it on a certain percentage, whatever that looks like, 50%, 60%, whatever it is, it allows your staff to still come up with solutions and have their voices heard. That is important. People want to be heard. If they see something that doesn't make sense, they're going to ask you why. So if you can change it, make the change, as long as it doesn't adversely impact things, right? As you get more and more experience and you sort of put in certain analysis on, is this having an impact on a different department that is adverse? What kind of impact is it having on another department? You analyze things. What you can allow to be flexible and what you can allow to not be flexible becomes more and more clear. So I hope you've enjoyed our video on when we should be consistent and when we should show flexibility as leaders. I would tend to lean more towards flexibility, but consistency on certain things is very important to an organization as well, because people want to be treated fairly. Everybody treated fairly with the same sort of boundaries, with one manager to another. So for additional resources or to schedule a session with me, please visit my website at www.yourimpoweredyou.com. You can email me at bman@yourimpoweredyou.com, or you can call me at 916-633-2555. And I thank you very much and have a very empowered day.